Top 5 toughest schedules of the Big 12. Suggested by Emery Winter. And by suggested, I mean he really strong-armed me into this. He came over, he muscled me up. It was not a pretty sight. You guys, I'm glad you didn't have to see that. You would have lost.
It made you look really weak.
Yeah, you would have lost a lot of respect for me. It's just, but I'm telling you about it, but it's not, anyway. Number 5, TCU. This one, look, Dave, at Stanford, we don't know about Stanford, but, UCF with KJ Jefferson is going to be interesting. Throwing a non-con game at SMU, a rivalry at Kansas, Houston, who we don't know about, but at Utah, Tech at home, Oklahoma State, Arizona, all on the schedule for TCU this year, the way it falls. That's a particularly, to me, tough run of coaches early on when you get Malzahn, then you get Rhett Lashley, then you get Lance Leipold, and then you get Willie Fritz before a bye. And then after the bye, let's see if we get somebody who doesn't know what they're doing. Oh, no, it's Kyle Whittingham. So, Josh Neighbors was on Triple Option with me yesterday, and he made this point about looking at the schedule. He said, right now you can't really look at what the teams are going to be because we really have no idea. But if you want to look at the toughest stretches, who are the toughest stretches of coaches? And that, to me, is a pretty tough stretch of coaches.
Yep, that's a good one. As you were naming them up, I'm like, okay, that's going to be done. And then no. And then you bring up Utah at the end of all that.
And I didn't even mention that after Utah is Joey McGuire, Dave Aranda, Mike Gundy, all back to back to back. I'm just saying, to start that out, they've got a good run of guys who've had success.
Yeah, they get a late bye week, so they'll have that in mid-November and only have a couple of games after that bye week, I guess, to lick their wounds. But then that still is going to Morgantown and then hosting Utah. So, yeah, that's a pretty tough-looking schedule. I haven't had time to pour through all of these. And like you said, we don't even know who's going to be good or not. I mean, we got a loose idea, but as far as how formidable are they really, that remains to be seen. But, yeah, you can have a pretty good guesstimation on some, and so that run of coaches, like you said, and just the names there, that's a little bit daunting, but I also know that there's going to be a lot less travel involved for UCF, or at least some less travel, so that maybe plays in their hands a little bit, but yeah, that's a tough-looking schedule.
Yeah, so for TCU, number 5. Number 4...
Yeah. Oh, you're talking about TCU.
Yeah.
Shoot, my bad. I was looking at UCF. My bad. Yeah. So they got Arizona and Cincinnati, or road trip to Cincinnati to close it out. So a couple of the relative newcomers. But yeah, you're right. That stretch there in the first 6 weeks of UCF, SMU, Kansas, and Houston, and then that second leg of Utah Tech, Baylor, Oklahoma State. I mean, that's a good little 8 games out of 9 weeks that'll be interesting for them.
Yeah, and again, this is without knowing what the teams are going to be. Look, for all we know, Baylor could be bad again, or they could all of a sudden, all this could work. And
their trend was down in 20, up in 21. Looked like they were going to follow it up, but then down in 22. And then when they followed up with last year, that was just now the trend is over. So who knows what it is.
Number 4, Houston. Look, you talk about coaches. The first 2 they got to play are Barry Odom and Brent Venables, so that's pretty good right there. Look, they lost to Rice last year, and they play them, obviously. Then here's the run of coaches they have. Matt Campbell, Sonny Dykes, Lance Leipold, Whittingham, Kleiman, back to back to back to back. That is a sledgehammer of coaches, especially that.
That's my word, not yours.
Yeah, especially in particular after the bye for them when they get Kansas, Utah, Kansas State back to back to back. For a team that's going to be in the first year of a head coach under Willie Fritz, that is a really tough stretch between the byes.
Yeah, I'm excited, though, to see Houston with a change at the top. I didn't mind Dana Holgerson just in general following the guy and watching him, but I know when he's the head coach of your program, it's a little bit different, and so he seemingly worn out his welcome down there in H-Town, and so a lot of excitement about Willie Fritz and what he can do, and obviously the man's got some skins on the wall, and now he's got a bit more to play with in terms of resources and location and things like that, being back in the state of Texas. Not that New Orleans was a bad spot, but being back in Houston is a big deal, I think, with all the familiarity that he has and the options that they'll have down there. So, that's a it's a fun schedule for year one for Willie Fritz. So I'm very excited to see how quickly he can get that thing strumming along.
Yeah. Number 3, Iowa State. This one's different because they have both their buys are earlier in that their first buy is week number 3. They're the only school that has that in week number 3. And look, they play Iowa right before it, so that's probably good because that game is usually really, really physical. It's a huge rivalry game. And look, that's one that they don't usually come out unscathed, no matter how good or bad anyone's offense is. Then what really sticks out to me is even after that first bye, Arkansas State, Houston, Baylor, not teams you really know a lot about. At West Virginia is going to be tough. UCF could be tough there, but that's in Ames. Then the second bye, it's Tech, Kansas, Cincinnati, Utah, and Kansas State, but the 4 out of 5 of those to close the season, again, not knowing what Cincinnati is going to be next year at all, but just assuming that 4 out of 5 teams last year were in bowl games, and 3 of those teams in the last couple of years have been very, very good. That is a very tough stretch to end the run for Matt Campbell at the end of the season.
I mean, based off last year, that first part of the schedule, they should start off pretty well, although Iowa's always a coin flip there with that game. But, yeah, I mean, really the attractive part of that schedule is that third leg of those 5 games to close the season. I don't know that you love having a bye in week 3 after Iowa, but it does lead you into the fact that you're going to have another bye. I mean, that's great. That takes away from it and makes it less painful that you're having one that early, week 3. But yeah, that's weird, and that does help lead to 5 straight games to close the season. Now, they won't be alone in that, but most teams have their bye in either the first or second week of November. So they'll be going straight through, and we'll see what kind of shape they're in health-wise. But if they're shaped up pretty well, that's going to be a potential gauntlet, but they should also be in pretty good shape, I would think. I mean, going to Morgantown, UCF, I mean, we'll see on some of those, but I don't feel like Iowa State can't pull those things off. Yeah. So really the big question marks all come in that last 5-week stretch. And if Cincinnati's good, then that throws a lot of things for a loop because I think everybody's just kind of defaulting and thinking that they're not going to be that great just based on last year. But if they're feisty and good, then that could really make things even that much tougher for everybody.
Good. The transfer portal changes how you can prognosticate things because you don't know who they've picked up and gotten rid of that's like changed the whole team dynamic to take a team that wasn't very good to one that, look, a team like Cincinnati doesn't have to be 9-3 to be dangerous. If they're 6-6, they can be dangerous based on last year because they're going to get more wins than they did. So inherently, they're more dangerous than they were a year before. You just hope you're not one of the teams that gets caught in the improvement of Cincinnati or a team like that. Same with Baylor. Like, we don't know what they're going to be, but you don't want to be one of the teams that's like, oh, this team won 3 games last year. Now they've won 7. We're one of the 4 that they used to improve. Like, that's where you don't want to be. Number 2, BYU. Now, to start the season on the road at SMU on a Friday, which is going to be a tough place to play. At Wyoming, which we've seen can be a black hole for some people when they go there. Kansas State at home, but that's not a team you ever really are thrilled about coming in because of the way they play. They come here to Baylor where they lost the last time they were here, but we'll see about that. It's after the bye that jumps out at me. You've got Noah Fafita at Arizona. You've got Mike Gundy at Oklahoma State and a team with Ollie Gordon that's going to come right at you. And then at UCF and KJ Jefferson before finishing out with Arizona, Kansas State, Utah, Kansas, Arizona State, and Houston. Now, those last 2 are kind of, but at Utah, Kansas, those are going to be tough. And where I don't want to play Arizona State in Jaden Rashada's second year is probably late in the year if they start to gel as a team and get confident with some of the players that Kenny Dillingham has brought in there. I would rather play Arizona State early in the season in September and not want to play them in November because if you're worried about the upset specials late in the year, I would think Arizona State could be a team that in Kenny Dillingham's second year, weeks 9, 10, 11, and 12 could jump up and bite you.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see on that. I mean, they've got some potential, but I'm not buying into that just yet. I mean, but you do have to leave room for that possibility. I guess that's better to cross that bridge when we get there because that's so late in the year. That's so far from now. But looking at it on paper, you aren't that worried about it, quite frankly, if you're BYU, even though it's in Tempe. So, yeah, I mean, I think a lot of that second half of the schedule will just depend heavily on how the first half of it started out and how many games you're trying to win to just get to a bowl game after not making one last year after starting off so well. So you definitely want to avoid that. But if they start off well this year, I think it sets up relatively okay for them. I mean, Utah is a game you'd say right now, you'd go, that's a loss. You'd say Kansas, you'd probably say that's a loss. But a lot of these other ones, Oklahoma State, I'd probably say that's a loss. But outside of that, in that second half of the schedule, I mean, you never really know because you don't quite, again, know what you're getting. But that first half of schedule at SMU, at Wyoming, K-State, at Baylor, 3 road games in your first 5, that will be a stretch where you're going to start off 1-0 because you're going to beat Southern Illinois. But if you're not freaking careful, man, you go in that first bye week at like 1-4, which would be insane, but that's entirely possible. So, yeah, that's going to be interesting to watch those first few weeks.
And number 1, for the second year in a row, West Virginia. And that is due in large part because there are only 2 non-conference games in the entire Big 12 schedule. Well, I mean, and feel how you want to about Mississippi State. I'm not trying to dog them or Nebraska. Again, we're still seeing. But the 2 best non-conference games are at Oklahoma for Houston and Penn State at home for West Virginia. Like those are the 2 kind of jewel games of the Big 12 non-con schedule. So West Virginia starts out with Penn State. Look, they're at Pitt. Like that rivalry is back, and it'll be, they won it last year. And more power to them, but you kind of never know how that game's going to go. Kansas, then the bye at Oklahoma State, Iowa State, Kansas State, at Arizona, at Cincinnati, Baylor, UCF, and Tech to end the season. So of their entire schedule, they only play 4 teams that weren't bowl teams last year. All the rest is really, really good. You've got some really good quarterbacks in that stretch. When you talk about Fafita and Daniels potentially, KJ Jefferson, Baron Morton, Avery Johnson, all of that on the schedule there. Plus they got to play Ollie Gordon, and they've got to deal with Penn State right off the bat. So a super tough schedule and a rivalry game that is unpredictable every single year. Every single time they play it.
Worked out okay last year. I mean, for all the talk about how tough it was, they managed that just fine and won, 8 games and all was said and done, I believe. I double-check on that. But, yeah, I mean, Penn State at the very beginning will be one of, if not the best non-con games for sure. And like you said, Pittsburgh's always a rivalry game of interest, and so that one will have some extra heat on it as well. So, yeah, they'll be pretty well tested, I would think, in the first 3 weeks of the season heading into Big 12 play. But, yeah, that's a team that's got a lot of confidence, I think, going in. I don't know how hot the seat is for Neil Brown this year because last year he was clearly coaching for his job, pretty much it felt like week to week, almost. Not that he was going to get fired midseason, but I don't know. If things had gone off the rails pretty badly, maybe he would have, just because the heat was turned up so hot. Now it's died down a little bit, and I don't know what the expectations are, except for that they expect to be better because a lot of those guys are coming back. So, yeah, very intrigued by those first couple of non-con games, and then I think that'll be able to let us kind of reset our expectations for then what to anticipate from the Mountaineers when Big 12 play hits. But, yeah, that's definitely one of the teams that you've got to throw in there when you're talking about contenders. I think that's only fair, and it's unfair to leave them out based on what we saw last year.
I am now getting a headache thinking about having to do the Big 12 media poll. I don't even want to think about it. But West Virginia.
Could be digging ditches.
West Virginia, I screwed you last year.
Let's go pave roads.
Absolutely. All right,